is there anything in this episode or this issue that deals with the very controversial issue of antidepressants and their effect on the human mind?
Yeah, I saw people asking about that. So, antipsychotics. Here's one thing that I'll say about
or SSRIs are not antipsychotics.
Yeah, not SSRIs. I don't have a good informed opinion on antidepressants. I just don't know enough about it. I wouldn't know how to comment on that intelligently. I will say that antipsychotics, which are a sort of an extreme thing, right? There's all kinds of incredible research being done, but it's still very early days in our understanding of what drugs do to the brain and what happens here and there. And so, antipsychotics, there was a statistically significant group of people I'm going to misrepresent this, but basically I was talking to a university professor who had done this study about, she was a clinical psychologist who had done a study about people taking antipsychotics, and a certain number of the patients were so transformed by this new generation of antipsychotics that they voluntarily went off them to go back to the hallucinations that they'd had before. Wow. It's not a lot of people. I don't want to misrepresent the number, but it was a statistically significant group of people, which means that there are people whose for whatever reason their reaction is, I would rather. So in one of the cases that she described was a homeless man who believed that he was being pursued by the Russians, and was living in stark terror in this kind of Cold War nightmare every waking moment. And he was homeless and so forth, but just a ruined guy. He begins to get this antipsychotic medication, and it turns off not just your hallucinations, but it also maintains your ability to reason and function. It can be very helpful sometimes if it works. And I'd like to point out that's not always true. But he was so destabilized by discovering that nobody wanted him. The Russians didn't want him. Nobody wanted him. He's just a homeless guy,
So
right?
he's bummed out?
Yeah, he's just a bum dude, and he was
But he was bummed out. That
because he wasn't special anymore, right? He was the star of his own action movie for so long, and poor guy, and he voluntarily went back to living that life.
Wow.
He took the blue pill and then whatever it was, and then wished he hadn't.
Well, I would like to see what he saw before I made any sort of a judgment on him, because who knows? He might have been living in an awesome world, like a Winnie the Pooh ride at Disneyland.
Totally.
Just neon colors everywhere and fucking Russian agents hiding behind two-dimensional trees.
Driving a Camaro, driving a convertible.
Yeah, who knows what he actually saw. Antipsychotics, although a fascinating subject, is quite different from the SSRIs.
Yeah, absolutely.
Which I think the SSRIs subject is a really, really interesting one.
Yeah, what's your feeling about it? Do you
I don't need them, so I feel like it would be really silly of me to make a judgment in one way or another.
Yeah.
I don't have any personal experience with them, but I do have friends who have had personal experience with them, and including people that I really respect, that they changed their life for the better.
That's right.
So I definitely think there's certainly a benefit to them, and there's and I don't know. The other thing is which one. I have a friend, and he got on some antidepressants, and they started him off on one, and it sucked, and then they switched that and got him to another one. How do you feel on this? And then they doubled his dose, and I'm like, what the fuck are they doing? Like, they don't have they don't do a blood test and give you a very specific. This is what you weigh.
This is exactly the thing. We don't know how it works in the brain, right? The blood-brain barrier is basically the body's system for keeping things, only the tiniest molecules from passing into your brain, because it's such an important organ. No one gets in, right? VIP.
Except weed and booze. Get right in.
They do get right in. They get the front of the line. So, the ability of medications coming through that barrier to change your mood or your outlook on life, it's such a difficult thing to predict.
Wow. Yeah, and not only that, it's so variable between human beings that it's one person would describe. You'd almost think you're dealing with a completely different substance. One person's reaction to another.
Sure.
For some folks, it's mild. For other folks, they have horrible side effects, and they can't tell until they put you on it.
Right.
It seems like there's so many variables when it comes to any sort of a medication that affects the mind, because you're dealing with who knows how many thousands of generations of genetics, where your origin was. pretty well known that certain people, certain nationalities have a difficult time with alcohol because they don't have a cultural history of it. They don't have a genetic history of it.
Well, the truth is, human beings don't have a history of alcohol. We're not evolutionarily, supposed to be drinking booze. This stuff is poison in terms of just the toxicology of it. But we evolved literally. I mean, there's a whole field of evolutionary biology that studies the moment that we began to drink alcohol. And it was, I couldn't even guess when. It's probably 5th century BC or something, way long time ago. But the idea was that, or one theory is that you would drink it in order to survive eating rotten meat.
Yeah, traveler's poisoning, they would call it.
Oh, is that true?
Traveler's sickness,
Huh.
yeah.
Huh.
They would drink wine with all of their food because the alcohol in the wine they thought would kill rotten meat.
Totally.
They hadn't really figured out how to refrigerate things.
Look at you, Joe Rogan. You want a job?
No, thanks. I also read a fascinating thing about the origins of alcohol being that it was with honey.
Huh.
That they had figured out a long time ago that honey was a preferred method of storing things in because it prevented deterioration, prevented things
it's a preservative.
spoiling. And one of the things that happens with honey is that it ferments and it becomes mead. And mead,
Delicious.
yeah, this was one of the theories of Terence McKenna on the changing of cultures from earlier psychedelic-based mushroom cultures to cultures that were more alcohol-based, was that they started storing their mushrooms in honey. And that a very...
That's so great. Is that true? That's so funny.
I don't know. I mean, I don't think there's... I think any history older than 6,000 BC is like...
Who knows? Yeah.
Good luck.
Good luck. That's right.
Try to figure that out.
That's
But
right.
they know that many cultures were preserving mushrooms in various ways. Some of them were drying them out over the fireplace. They were doing all these different things with mushrooms, and they know for sure they started storing them in honey. And they also know that there was climatological changes where mushrooms weren't growing in areas anymore, and they had to switch to different intoxicants. And then the raping and the pillaging started. And then shit got crazy. According to McKenna, at least. But